Well, as we count down to the opening of the World Economic Forum's annual meeting, we already have several guests here in Davos. And with me is the CEO of Wipro, TK Kurien. Mr. Kurien, thank you very much for joining us. You're fresh out of a round of interviews from earnings yesterday.
That's right, absolutely.
So I promise not to put a single earnings question to you.
Thank you.
But I will ask you about your outlook. If you haven't been asked that question a dozen times in the last 24 hours already, what's 2016 looking like?
So a couple of things that we see in 2016. So let me start with the macro view as far as the economy is concerned, which I think in some ways impacts us as a business.
Of course.
So if you look at the US till end of last year, we were all very bullish about the US in terms of discretionary demand. I think we're going to see a change in this year, primarily because of the US dollar. The US dollar has been very strong vis-a-vis other currencies. And with that, what we expect to see is more and more pressure on cost for all the US players.
Okay.
So the outsourcing business would start picking up as far as the US is concerned. We see discretionary budgets actually cut, maybe flat to reducing a little bit going forward, as far as the US is concerned. Europe, on the other hand, just the opposite. We see discretionary budgets going up clearly in Europe. And surprisingly, we're seeing a pretty strong uptick as far as discretionary budgets go, especially as they've started spending money that they've not done all these years.
Okay.
The other piece, of course, is that as you look at Asia and the rest of the world, that's what I would put them as. I think the emerging markets are going to get hit very badly. While they still have business to give, what we're finding is currency is really taking a big toll.
Yeah.
And India is the other dark horse. We've really not seen a massive pickup as far as India is concerned.
Quite the contrary. I think the largest India player is TCS, and they've had some rough quarters when it comes to India business. So.
And I think there are some fundamental issues in terms of the business, the acceleration of business from the government. That hasn't happened yet. Private sector customers are still spending money, but they're primarily spending money in outsourcing, and the deals are not that big.
Fair enough. So what you seem to be painting is a sort of cautious picture for 2016, which is pretty much what not just IT business leaders have been saying, but all business leaders have been saying, not just in India, but across the world. Right. What could be the triggers for growth, you think?
I think the first big trigger for growth would be if the China position stabilizes.
Okay.
People forget the fact that China today is between 12 and 14% of world GDP. If China drops 1%, that's a lot when it comes to the world's GDP. You take off roughly about 20 basis points off the world's GDP. And that's a big one. So overall, the China situation has to stabilize. If the Fed decides to raise interest rates again in the US, then I think we are into another bout of, I wouldn't say recession, but a stronger dollar, which is going to put a lot of pressure on US companies. And the funny thing is that consumer demand, which everybody expected with lower oil prices, that we haven't seen. Because fundamentally what's happened is the new generation buys things very differently. In fact, it's kind of interesting. One of my customers is a very large retailer in the US. Till now, what happened was Christmas season, they would sell a lot. Back to school season, they would sell a lot. Now what happens is back to school season, all the kids go to school, see what the other kids are wearing, and then decide what they want to buy. And
so it's the post-season season.
Exactly. And plus what's happening is that, assuming that Taylor Swift decides to wear something, then everybody buys that. So it's a very different environment that's coming at us. So I think overall, the way I see it is that we're going to have small upticks across the year, but there is going to be no secular up or down for the next couple of years.
Wow. So that's a fairly uncertain picture for business leaders to deal with. Now, at that time, there will be a fairly planned transition going on at Wipro.
Absolutely.
Right? You will step out of your current role. Talk us through what that transition will look like, how many years it's been in the pipeline, and how you're preparing for this next new phase for Wipro.
So there are a couple of things, and no transition is easy.
No.
And for us, it's been, it's something that we watch out for. Because for us, smooth transitions haven't been exactly a norm.
So I'm glad you said it. I was trying not to say it, but.
But I think what we have done this time is that we planned the transition 2 years ago, and we looked for candidates, both internal and external. Finally, end of last year, we decided 2015, of 14, we decided, 14, 15, we decided that Abid was the guy.
Okay.
We brought him on board. And then after that, he's been running a lot of the service lines. And so to that extent, large part of our growth comes from service lines, and he's been running that now for 9 months. So to that extent, he's very well versed on what the company is all about.
So this one's going to be a lot smoother.
Absolutely, no question about it.
Well,
I would say very smooth, not a lot smoother.
okay. There was something interesting you just told me about the Indian IT industry. It's a question I ask many IT leaders. Why is it that we haven't been able to scale to the size of some of our global peers? And I'm curious if you have an answer to that, because even our largest company to date hasn't managed to take over, or overtake rather.
It's pretty simple. I think the reasons are, obvious. First is that if you look at the way we run our business with our offshore component, there is a significant pricing element itself out there. Just in terms of man days and man hours, I'm sure we can kind of beat the global competitors very soon. The issue is going to be different. The pricing that we get for that is very much lower.
Yes.
The second piece, which I think is more important, there are some parts of the business that you will never get in scale. For example, if you look at markets like the US, you'll make entry into the government business in bits and pieces, but it will never be at the scale that you would see the global players making. And third and the last is, I think the most interesting part is, if you've seen some of the global players, and if you've seen the revenue decline in those players, you'll notice that the biggest revenue decline has happened in the commercial sector. So in the commercial sector, we see ourselves kind of competing hard and winning well. The issue is going to be as far as the public and the government sector is concerned. That's an area that's going to be completely close to us for a long time.
How do we improve the pricing bit? Because, whether it is having a larger portion of your revenue come in through higher end businesses like consulting or otherwise, I don't think any Indian company has as yet made that cut.
There is a fundamental difference. Every company to some extent is in some way tarred by its background. We came in from the outsourcing era, and we came in as Indian players. So to that extent, our basic value proposition was, we'll give you a better cost to value proposition. If you move that equation to value for business, that's a transition that you can't do in a couple of years. It's a longer term transition.
Well, we've been trying hard enough for many years.
I'm sure that one day in the next 5 to 7 years, I see that happening. And I already see parts of that happening with some of our competitors. But I think the biggest issue is going to be the acceptance of Indian players out there to be able to deliver that. The kind of service that a lot of customers, even if we do give it to them, people expect us to kind of discount that. And that's the problem.
Stuck being the cheaper alternative.
That's never going to be the case forever. If you look at Toyota, for example, they had to start a new brand called Lexus to actually go up market in terms of pricing.
Fair enough.
And I think that's the game.
Okay, so one last question, and it's on Davos. What are you looking forward to most here over the next 4 days?
Fabulous sessions, because every time you come here, number one, you meet a bunch of people, you meet a bunch of smart people, and you go back with a different point of view. And I'm hoping the weather doesn't remain like this.
You mean this is too warm for you?
It's too warm. A little colder would really help.
Okay, this is where I say goodbye. Thank you very much, Mr. Kurien.
Thanks a lot.
And it is not warm by any stretch of imagination. Thanks very much for joining us. Thank you.